Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is Guest Thursday, and we have a very special guest, Paul Marston from, are you from New Hampshire, or where are you from?
I am from Rye, New Hampshire.
Where is that?
It's right on the coast, and most people in the U.S. don't even realize New Hampshire has a coast. We have 16 miles of coast, and we are
beautiful
about,
coast of that.
Half a mile. That's it. And only about 15 minutes from Kathy's house.
Yeah. Do you go to the ocean much?
I do, but I'm, as you can tell from the complexion, I have to manage that. I can't imagine not living this close.
Hey, can I say, Paul's family has one of the historic fish houses on the coast of New Hampshire, which is absolutely amazing if you've ever seen historic photos of these. But we have had the pleasure of going out to hang out at it before, and it's absolutely beautiful, but pretty neat little place over there, piece of history.
Why is that?
They're small, but they're fun.
Why is that so special? What's about that makes it special?
Well, they were constructed maybe early 1800s. It's all circa. Nobody knows for sure. And there's 10 buildings, and there are 8 separate buildings, and there are maybe 20 by 20. So they're a good 280 years old now. And I got the age right? Yeah, and 200 years old. And they were original, and they were really used for fishing and lobstering. And they have kind of long histories, and they're really right up against the seawall and the water, so they're kind of a unique location. And
it's such a special place. Yeah, there's even a knife block in his wall where they used to hold the knives that they cut the fish with before they sold them out the back door.
Yeah, it's worn out.
Cool.
That is probably my favorite aspect of the whole thing. It's just a little worn out place.
Fascinating.
The knife and putting it back.
Yeah.
So do you?
I will say.
Go ahead, Kathy. Sorry.
I was just going to say. I will say. I have a personal affinity to having Paul on the show this week, just because one, he is Dan's C12 chair, but even more so than that. And Rich, I think you know this, but maybe haven't connected the dots fully. Paul is actually responsible for us knowing you.
Oh.
Rich and Paul and Dan met years ago. Was it at an FCA event? Is that what it was? At an FCA event?
It was an FCA event.
Yeah.
Yes. And because of C12.
Yes. Yeah. And so then Paul introduced Dan to C12 and invited him to come. And that is how Dan got connected to C12, which then in turn connected us to All for Jesus Living Waters and you guys. Right. So were Paul not at that FCA event, who knows where we'd be right now.
Yeah, that's amazing how God works. Were you?
And we got seated next to each other.
And you guys were kindred spirits,
and
right?
Paul,
away.
you were then a member of C12 at that point, right?
Yes, I joined in 2014.
Okay.
And then that was Dan's. It was only about a year later that Dan and I connected.
Yeah, that's amazing how God does that. And then you came to that retreat, Kathy, and then you guys really understood it, and then we got more and more active, and then of course you're now our partner on the podcast. So thank you, Paul.
It really wasn't. You know what, Rich? It wasn't long after that Yvonne and I, you conducted the Narragansett, Rhode Island retreat.
That's right.
Retreat. That would have been like 2016. It would have been like the next year.
That's
because we then bought this house.
That's right.
And it was at that retreat that this house came up, and and we kind of went through the process of the retreat.
That's right.
Isn't that wild?
What kind of business were you doing at that time when you were a member of C12?
When I was a member, I had 2 businesses. The one I was primarily stewarding was a trucking company. We hauled gasoline and jet fuel all throughout New England and up out of Canada, and serviced a lot of Vermont, and Boston, and like the Mass Turnpike, and a lot of the local airports, Manchester Airport and Portland Jetport. We were the provider there. Yeah, that was a different time.
Yeah.
Feels like a long time ago already, right?
It does, and it was family businesses, and that's its own classification, if you will. And so we had some other business enterprises. We had some golf courses that we were majority shareholders of, and my parents were getting older, and it was a very tumultuous time for sure.
Yeah. And you sold that trucking business, right?
That is true. We sold actually in 2022, we exited both our trucking and our golf course position.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. Well, we'd love to hear more about this story. So first of all, why don't you share how did you personally come to know Christ?
So it's really 100. Well, it's 98% my wife and maybe 2% the Lord, none me. So I was raised Roman Catholic. My mom was very devout in her Roman Catholic faith, and I went and completed all the sacraments. And however, it wasn't a something that I didn't have a connection to the Lord. And I would not disparage. I think there's a lot of wonderful Roman Catholics still have
absolutely.
friends there, and I get it. And I have friends that have deep connections with the Lord that are Roman Catholics.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for me, it wasn't. And it was fine. We had 2 young kids. Our kids were born in 2004 and 2006. So by 2009, they're now 5-6 years old, and we've got to figure out, boy, we should probably have these kids in church. We were not steadily going to church whatsoever at that point.
Where were you living? Where were you living then?
Living in the region. We were living in the seacoast. We weren't living in Rye. We were in Townover. We were in Northampton. And
you were you said wife, you were married by then, right?
Yes, I married my wife Yvonne in 2003, and she was raised as kind of a I want to say a nomad. Like she'd gone to a lot of different churches, always in the Protestant kind of line, and it was just really a little bit interesting in that my mom was so devout, and I was so attached to the religion of it all, right? That so we had a church in Rye that that's where you got married. And there's a country club there, and I was president of that. And that's what you did. You had your reception there, and you got married there, at the church. And my mom was very connected with the priests. So we actually didn't have one priest. We had 3 priests at our wedding perform our service. And it was all the bit Roman Catholic. And that's all I ever knew. And my wife, she went along with it. She was, it was fine, it was good, but she didn't really love it all. Like for her, she didn't really understand it, and I didn't understand why she didn't understand it. So now, fast forward, we got to find something for the kids, and I said, look, I don't have something for them in the Roman Catholic faith, so I'm open to what you want to do. So we end up going to Bethany Church because it's one of the larger churches in the area, had a great reputation for the kids program. And literally what I find out later, that's part of their marketing, part of the works. We go walking in, and sure enough, they've got this beautiful kids program. And I've got my entrepreneur hat on, and I'm like, wow, this is quite a business they got going here, and how they're doing this so well. And kids like it, they're at that age, love everything. And then we walk into the sanctuary, and I hear this pastor speaking, and I'm absolutely smitten by what I would eventually come to realize the Holy Spirit. And he's reading this book, and I'm like, wow, this is great. I've never heard this before. I mean, I've heard of Gospels, but I have no idea what they are. When I walk in, I have no idea of really what's what. And Pastor Bruce is got a wonderful way with.
He's a phenomenal teacher, right?
He's really great, and great presence about him. And I was so taken at that point. And so if that's 2009, I think I get baptized in 2012. And we're going through some very tough times as a family. The recession was really brutal. Yeah. We in the 2000s, our businesses all soared, and we went from $5 million trucking company. I took it over and it's $25 million. And it's doing great. And we're printing money and I'm so smart and me. Let's have cars and houses and everything we can do. And then, when the recession, the golf courses were doing their thing. And when the recession hit, now our $7 million, $8 million worth of debts came back on us. Our revenue was cut more than in half. It's its own podcast. The fact that we survive it is it's divine intervention the entire time. We had just refinanced away from personal guarantees.
Yep.
So we actually were sitting with, we were functionally in collections. We were in the reorganization department of Citizens Bank for a record amount of time, because after the recession, we were too small. We were like a $6.5 million debt. So everybody in our company in our area was $50 million worth of debt they couldn't pay. And we were the amount they were writing off. And yet we were too small and they didn't have any personal guarantees, so they couldn't really force us to do anything. And we wrote it out for years, and we eventually paid up all our debts. Times, but God, we had a lot of family strife during that. And it was, it was great to walk into Bethany. It was great for the kids. As my walk matured, and all of a sudden, I had this relationship with the Lord, and Yvonne's relationship strengthened. And all of a sudden, it wasn't this paradigm shift that it was, I actually need to look up, and I need to have this relationship with God, and then my marriage and my family and then my business, and that would all just work.
Yeah.
And that if Christ died for me on the cross and I'm this lousy person, then all this bitterness that I have towards my family and all these things will all of a sudden that doesn't have to be. It's not serving anybody. And it was really that relationship that eventually, because there was a point where my parents got divorced in that time, and it lasted like over 3 years. And so you couple all these family businesses, we have golf courses, all this stuff, and then you throw in a divorce, and really, I guess they're good.
It's really messy.
Bad. It was very contentious. Where we weren't even, I didn't see my mom for a year, and that was a whole family. Just trying to get her to take a tack that she just wouldn't ever do. And it was a relationship with God that said, you know what, just go back and love her, and just, we'll figure this whole thing out. And so it was, and then I joined C12 in 2014. And it was because of C12, all the support of other business owners. That was helpful, a lot of technical things, but it was establishing a relationship with God, a daily, that this isn't my resource. Even at that point, when I walked into C12, the notion that I was stewarding someone else's resource, no, this was me. And it took a while. That's a paradigm shift, right? And it was, C12 was super, Buck Jacobson, the program is super helpful. It's just seeing it differently. And then all of a sudden it's a daily, I think the number one thing is having a daily morning relation, starting your day with journaling and talking to God and in prayer, and that habit, that connection above any technical thing that we did with insurances and programs and reports and all the stuff we did in C12, which was great, all good things, was probably the most impactful, and it's still to this day, and I hope to always have that.
Yeah. Wow, beautiful.
Sorry for the long answer.
No, it's beautiful.
It's great.
So you became so you and your wife are kind of beginning to walk together, and you're learning what it means to walk with God, and you have this personal relationship. And then you got exposed to abiding. Tell us about that and what that's meant for you, and then we can talk a little bit about what does that look like for you, for the audience to understand it. But tell us about your experience with abiding and a more deeper relationship with Christ.
Yeah, so going to neutral, learning how to go to neutral with my wife is so important. And it's something that you learn it outwardly, but you really learn it inwardly.
Yeah.
And and we start there and really start with that blank page of, okay, we've got a question, we've got an opportunity here for what we're going to do next. What does the word say? And it's for us, it's a combination of what does the word say? What is God saying to us individually in our quiet time? What are the circumstances saying? We listen to that. And then we kind of communicate with each other and say, well, how are we going to honor God as we move forward here?
Yeah.
It's an ongoing process. I think when things are going well, we tend to, we probably are not as focused on abiding together on our decisions until we have impact. Like all of a sudden we have a tough decision because we made some lousy decisions. Now we need to abide and see, how we're going to get through this. And I think that that's probably a weakness that we're going through now is creating an opportunity to do that more regularly.
Right.
Which we're going to start doing something a little different on the weekends, where we have some kind of check-in time on the weekends. That's not, it's not date, it's not like family finances and that kind of stuff. It's just kind of as human beings, how are we doing? So we're going to start doing that soon.
Yeah,
that'd be good.
Did Dan tell you about our Saturday morning dates that God gave us? Because we used to try to put that check-in time into our Friday night dates, and felt like God directed us. It's probably been about, I don't know, 6 months or a year, probably a year anyway, that he switched that to Saturday mornings and said, remove it from your true date night and make it a date in and of itself, because that will be a joy. And it's no holds barred breakfast. We get to eat whatever we want. Bacon, cinnamon rolls, pancakes, waffles. That's the time that we don't worry about what we're eating and whatever. It's just a fun breakfast date, and we sit with our journals and share with each other what God's been saying throughout the week. And it's been such a sweet place, honestly, to remove it from another date and to give it its own separate space from anything else. And so that's been a fun. I don't know if he shared that with you in your C12 stuff.
He did share, but now as you told the story, it all came back to me. Yes, he absolutely did.
Yeah, so that's a fun place.
It is very special.
Yeah.
And I know, like you said, you guys are kind of trying to find how to make a new rhythm of that now in your life. I do know just from walking beside you, kind of through Dan walking beside you, how important abiding is to your C12 group. Like I see, I hear you guys processing and praying together and really speaking life into each other through abiding in the business world. And so given that Yvonne's not on the broadcast with us right now, I think it might be neat for some of the other business people out there to hear what that looks like in a business setting, as even as cohorts walking alongside each other. What does that look like to bring that into business relationships as well?
Oh yeah, you sure we can't talk about her while she's not here?
We'll have to give her equal time.
We'll get her on here for sure.
Not that you can't share on that, but I just think you bring a unique perspective because y'all do it well in the business place. I think it's fun to share it.
Just kidding. No, it's great. No, it's everything, right? I mean, we know that God knows the answers. We know that the Holy Spirit will guide our thoughts, right, to His will, and it's kind of a basic way to say it, but it's a secret. It's a superpower, right? At the end of the day, we forget, right? We forget we have this connection, and we're trying to. God has this big plan, and we just need to figure out how we fit into it. We get into the flow of His plan. It's a lot easier to succeed. And so, it's specifically, how does it look? It's the same C12 has a very systemic way to do it, right? It's the word. It's when you have a big decision to make, go to the word. What does the word say? We always go to the word, and we go to prayer, and we go to circumstances, and we go, what is the world? It's there's some logic to it, right? God doesn't want you to ignore the world around you. And we go to the experts, the wise people that you have, and you're going to take all of that in, and you're going to pray and put that request before the Lord, and you're going to call Rich Case. You're going to you're going to bring it, you're going to bring you're going to, it's not just the accountants of the world that are wise and your financial advisor and you've got another group of business owners. With C12, we're blessed to have, we did it yesterday at our forum. It was so beautiful to watch. We had extroverts telling introverts that they needed to step in and have a coffee with somebody they were having a challenge with via emails. And he said, okay, enough of that. You need that. We're all Superman and Superman by email, and we're He-Man by social media, but we're Mickey Mouse by, over coffee. Right. You get face to face. And so, we get in each other's head in a good way because we're fellow Christian business leaders. We have spiritual wisdom. We have a spiritual way of looking at things. We're looking at things in a godly way. Not everybody, I guess, that's going to give you some of that worldly counsel may or may not always be, have a Christian beliefs. Hopefully they do. You surround yourself with that, and that's really powerful. And praying and opening up and listening and praying that the Holy Spirit will speak to you. It's probably not going to be, in a loudspeaker, but he's going to nudge you. He's going to put thoughts in your head. It's going to be people in your path. He's going to open up conversation. God is working 24/7. Not that he cares about time. And the more we open up and see that, the more we see that. The muscle gets worked. And so, doing a little bit of work with the Blackaby, Richard Blackaby program, and Henry and Richard, and they've helped me to help the other members of the group to walk in the Spirit more, to really. What we don't want to do are things like come up with our own worldly plans and say, God, but I'm going to be able to give so much more when this is done, and this is going to be great. And of course it's a great plan. We're going to make all this money, God, you and me.
Yeah,
together.
bless my plan.
Yeah, because it might not be now, and it might not be ever, and we just don't know the turns, right? We don't know if this bad news is really bad news because, are we going to pray to how does 1 John 5 go? That we have this blessing, that confidence that we can go before God because He'll give us whatever we ask, as long as we ask according to His will.
Right. 1 John 5, 14 and 15.
Yep. And being able to do that, it requires, okay, His will.
Yeah. How
am I going to love God with this decision? How am I going to love my neighbor as myself in this decision? Now, so what could be His will for this? And that just puts you in a different spot. And that's where we have to remind each other often. But he wronged me. I know he wronged you. I know, but how can we show, how can you not step in the mud with him?
Yeah.
And maybe you just don't know. Do you really know what he's going to do?
Yeah. And when you you talk about, praying according to His will, which means we got to hear it. You made a statement, and you and your wife said you've learned it, is go to neutral. Define that for us. What does that mean that you've gone to neutral in order to understand God's will?
I'll probably get this wrong, Rich, because it has been 7 years. But for me, it is meaning that situation, I am completely okay with however the situation goes. If the result is to go what Yvonne has come up with, then that's going to be great. If the result's migrate, then it's better. No. Or something totally new, something totally that God brings on us, but that really and honestly and with integrity be at a spot where, and because what does that really require, right? Most of the time, maybe 100% of the time, our spouses or the person we're having the conflict with has some reasonable idea that they want to execute.
Yeah, right.
It's just their idea and it's not yours. And maybe, they don't value time the way you value, or money, or whatever. And so it's getting to that spot where you're willing to not accept, you could embrace any idea, including an idea which is not yours.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So neutral, being that, you have a position, but you're not going to try to persuade anybody to that position. You're going to seek God, and you're neutral toward His answer, which is going to be best and none better. And by the way, it could be your wife's, could be yours, could be something new. And neutrality is a really important piece of seeking God's will. Otherwise, you're doing what you suggested, and that is that a lot of people say, well, I've got this great plan. God bless my plan. And God says, well, you got to be neutral because I have a better one. Which is kind of important.
It's so tricky. And that's not like I said tricky is a bad word. It is so easy to fall into that trap. Right?
Yeah.
Just our minds, our fleshly minds get in front of us. They want to protect us. They want to be, limit fear and do all these things.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. Well, we want to pick up next time and have you kind of walk us through how you've actually experienced that in some real life situations. I know that you just described that you were a CEO with a business in C12 as a member, and then God led you to actually become a leader in C12. So we want to find out, how did you process that? And I know I went through with a little bit with you with you sold your golf course, and that was another story of God at work where you couldn't do it yourself anyway. And so we want to try to apply these things that you've said in our next session so that people get a handle on, well, how does that really work? So that's what we're going to do. Thank you so much for sharing and your enthusiasm for God and how wonderful we can see how wonderful it is for you and privileged it is. And so we're just thrilled that you're on the podcast with us. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us, and we will pick it up next session.
Sounds great.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
again
for inviting me. I'm excited. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it really is.
Be sure. Thank you so much, guys. And be sure to join us next week as Paul finishes up sharing this story. And if you have questions, send them in to questions@afjministry.com, and we'll be sure to talk about them. But just looking forward to hearing the rest of your story. Thanks, Paul, and thank you, everyone.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.